Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next event in the Onward Marquee. As I think you know, I'm Sebastian Payne, Director of Onward, and I think you also know who we've got here on our stage is James Cleverly, former Home Secretary, Shadow Home Secretary, and also leadership contender for the Conservative Party. Exactly. Have you forgotten about that? You can tell he hasn't, 'cause he's got a large cup of black coffee here, and that was the first thing he asked when he came to this marquee. So we're here for an hour-long in-conversation event. I want to make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to ask James a few questions about some things close to Onward's heart and my heart, and then we'll open out for as many questions as possible. We'll have some roving mics, which will be fun in this nice crowded marquee. And when we come to that, nice, short, sharp question to get as much insight from James as possible. Cool. So I'm going to kick off. You've said many times, probably over the last 48 hours, about what your pitch is to be leader. Why are you different from the other three?
Well, look, first and foremost, we have got a really good slate of candidates. And I'm probably doing myself a disservice by saying this, but they're all friends, they're all Conservatives, they're all excellent. And that sets us apart from the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and every other party straight from that. The reason I'm putting myself forward is, notwithstanding we have excellent other people running, I know I am the best option for the future of the party, because we now need to recognise the two functions that we have now, not at some random point in the future, now. The first is to be able to hold Labour to account. And I know where the bodies are buried. I know what they are doing wrong, because I know how you're meant to do it right. So during the protests, when people were saying, oh, you should be tougher with the protests, I was able to ask why contingency planning that I'd put in place had not been operationalised, why COBRA had not been held, why mutual assistance arrangements had not been put in place, because I knew what I would have done had I been the Home Secretary. And of course, that experience also means that I know how to win elections. I've been a party chairman, the party chairman who was at the heart of our 2019 general election campaign when we won the largest majority we'd experienced in decades. So that experience means I know what to do and I know what needs to be done. The other part, which I suppose is linked to that experience, is the second function in opposition, which is to sell yourselves, your party, your ideas, your agenda. And that's a communications job. And I am the most experienced and effective communicator that is running. There is a reason why I was constantly asked to do the media, particularly when things were tough. When someone else screwed up, it was my job to go onto the television and try and clear up the mess. And that experience means that I know that I can communicate on behalf of the party. And when you're in opposition, that is at least half the job. So the experience of running stuff and the experience of communicating is why I think I am the best place amongst a competitive and excellent field.
So there's been some reports around that you were the candidate that the Labour Party would be most worried about in terms of when they think about who might go up against the Prime Minister at the dispatch box. And a lot of what you've said, James, is very good when we're thinking about the country and where the party needs to go. But when it comes to party members, you've maybe acquired this thing of having some slightly more leftish of the party vibes, which is quite odd for someone who backed Boris Johnson, backed Brexit, and backed Liz Truss. So where have those vibes developed from, and do you think this is a problem?
So I don't think those vibes exist.
Imaginary vibes.
I think people are trying to paint me into that particular corner because there's a leadership campaign coming on. People want to define themselves. They also want to try and define others. I'm very comfortable with where I stand within the party.
Where would you define that? If you were to say on a spectrum, what would you describe yourself as?
No, look, look, you're asking the wrong question. No, you're asking the wrong question. No, because look, so how do you define it? I give you two examples where I was an outlier. Okay, before I was a parliamentary candidate, before I'd been selected, I put out a post on my blog basically saying that I'm in favour of gay marriage. I love marriage. I think it is a benefit to society as a whole. I don't think my relationship with Susie is diminished in any way if Steve and Mark, a gay couple, get married. Their love and happiness does not detract from my love and happiness. So I came out for gay marriage way before it was cool. People told me that would end my parliamentary career and I'd never get selected.
And here we are.
And yet here we are. So where does that put me on the spectrum? Okay, pause that thought. Don't answer it, just pause that thought. In January of 2016, I was one of 6 newly elected parliamentarians who wrote an open letter saying, David Cameron is not asking for enough from the EU, so even if he gets everything he's asking for, I will still have to vote and campaign to leave the European Union. And I was told that I was an outlier, that that was a suicide note when it comes to my political career. So where does that put me on the spectrum? So I was a Thatcherite before it was cool. I was out for Brexit before it was cool. People are trying to paint themselves in a particular way. I'm not trying to overcompensate for anything. I'm totally comfortable with where I am. If you want to describe my low tax, less regulation, more freedom, common sense, not messing about, get with the program attitude as left wing, give it your best shot.
But what you are saying, though, is I think you're the coolest candidate, is what you just said there.
Your words, not mine, but I struggle to disagree.
Now, let's talk about the predicament the Conservative Party finds itself in at the moment, that over the last 6 months, Onward has been doing research into how and why we lost the election, our Breaking Blue report that was launched yesterday. And within that, we've said it was a catastrophic loss for the Conservative Party. It was the worst loss in a century, and that people need to measure up to that fact. And the number one theme throughout our Breaking Blue research is trust and competence. Yeah. People no longer trust the Conservative Party to do what it says, and they don't believe they would be competent. Now, fixing that when you're in government is relatively easy. You've got Whitehall, you've got Levers, you've got the civil service. In opposition, it's really hard. So, we're sitting here in 2 months' time, you're leader of the opposition. How would you demonstrate trust and competence?
Well, the combination is key, trust and competence. So the first thing we need to do is win back the trust of the British people. And that means honesty. That means honesty about what we did wrong, but it also means honesty about what we say we're going to do next. If, as I believe it is, a big part of the problem is that we overpromised using very strident language, then spectacularly failed to deliver against that strident language. The response to being rejected by the voters for doing that, in my mind at least, is not to do that again. And it's very, very easy, very tempting, and it gets you clicks and likes on social media, and it gets you a round of applause in think tank events like this, to just do what we did in the past, which is to go, I will just be very tough. No nonsense with me. I will do this, do that, blah, boom. But we tried that. We went into general election saying, I will stop the boats. But the British people turned around and went, I don't believe you. We went into the election, I will cut immigration. And the British people went, yeah, you say that every election. I don't believe you. So repeating the lyrics of a song that no one wants to hear is the opposite of what we should be doing. The second part of it is about the delivery. And we were promising far too much. And we'd slipped into this habit of a government solution to every ailment. Don't like it? I'll legislate against it. Next door neighbour upset you? There's a law for that. Shoes don't fit? I will tax and subsidise. And it got to the stage where having promised, you have a whole load of people saying, you made me a promise and you failed to deliver. So let's be calmer and more thoughtful in our language. Let's promise fewer things. Let's deliver on everything we promise. As you say, in opposition, it is a lot harder, which is why our local government base is so essential. It is now the vehicle through which we demonstrate competence and professionalism. So when I talk about unity, I'm not just talking about Leave, Remain, or Left, Right, or One Nation, or Cornerstone, or whatever. I'm talking about Westminster, and Holyrood, and Cardiff Bay, and City Hall, and County Hall, and Town Hall, and county councillors district councillors. It's about bringing the whole clan together, the whole team on the pitch, all pulling in the same direction. If we do that, we can use our performance in local government as a proof point about what we would do in national government, and that's how we get back into office.
So this thing about trust and competency as well, I mean, we're 3 months into the Labour government, and I think the whole freebies row, obviously it's backfired pretty badly on the Starmer government. The poll rating suggests that. But I would say it also creates a wider problem for politics as well, because Keir Starmer went into the election promising change, and within 3 months, a lot of voters have said, well, things are just as they were before. Things haven't changed. And it may be bad for the Labour Party, but I think in some ways it's bad for the whole of politics, that you've got, a Prime Minister who's taken, free glasses and clothes and whatever from Lord Ali. So first of all, I assume if you were to become leader of the opposition, would you buy all your own clothes and glasses? And have you done that in the past? And second of all, how would you tackle that kind of general apathy towards politics generally about, they're all the same, you can't trust them, that feeling?
So this whole thing about free clothes has come up. And I would love to say every single item of clothing I possess I bought myself, but I have had a number of gifts, and not just the traditional gifts you get from family and loved ones, but some of the clothes that I value the most highly were gifts. I've got a traditional Ukrainian shirt, with the embroidered front, but in that olive drab with the camouflage motif around the neck that I was given by an orphans charity in Kyiv, on the outskirts of Kyiv, when I went to Ukraine. You know what? That is a gifted item of clothing that I wear with pride. But your broader point, your more serious point, is about what your offer is to the electorate. The Labour Party clearly, and there was a lesson for us here, the Labour Party clearly thought that in order to win and to govern, two things, different things, all they had to do was to be not us. And that's not enough. And because they haven't got anything positive to offer, all these things are biting them and biting them really, really hard. Again, let's learn the right lessons, not the wrong lessons. You can say stuff that's superficially popular in order to win, in order to get the job. And that can be true in a leadership campaign, or it can be true in a general election campaign. And if you think that being the leader or the prime minister is the end of the process, you're wrong. Because it's not about what you are, it's about what you do. And the Labour Party have no mandate to do anything. Their only mandate is to not be us. And they have discharged that now, and they're living with the consequence of not having a positive agenda. So you should take, and you should only take, leadership positions if you intend to lead, not be the leader. And I'm absolutely certain about this in my leadership campaign, and it will be the same going into an election. If you're promising to do stuff, then you have something which you can rally around and which you can champion. If all your promise is to not be something else, then you will trip up every single time. And it might not be glasses or clothes or a luxury penthouse, but it will be something else. So let's not make the same mistakes they made.
Now, in our election research, we said that the Conservatives need to think about appealing to both reform defectors and Lib Dem defectors at the same time. Our work said that 23% of the Conservative vote we lost went to Reform, 7% went to Liberal Democrats, and you've got to do both at the same time. How would you go about doing that?
So again, it's about analysing what went wrong last time. So we lost votes in both directions. So the idea that we lost votes because we were too right-wing or too left-wing is a nonsense, because that would explain if we only lost votes in one direction. But we didn't. We lost votes in both directions. I've already hinted at it. We lost votes. We lost votes because of our tone and underperformance. our tone are this kind of harsh, nails down a blackboard way of discussing contemporary issues, alienated a lot of people who either stayed at home or drifted off to the Lib Dems. Almost no one went to Labour, but a load of Conservatives stayed at home or drifted to the Lib Dems because we were just harsh and shrill and not nice. We lost a lot.
Do you worry about that still happening? That tone, that sort of the
if you get it wrong,
blackboard.
If you get it wrong, if again, it's about learning the right lessons rather than the wrong lessons. If you think that just being nasty, no, not nasty. We've never been nasty, but if you think that just trying to sound tough, if you think being rejected at the ballot box because you tried to sound tough but weren't, that the response to that is to try to sound tougher, I think you're wrong. So if trying to sound tough but not delivering lost us the election to the Lib Dems and a big chunk to Reform, then do it the other way round. Do it the other way round. Less talk, more delivery. Fewer promises, but deliver on everything you promise. Actually, a more compelling, optimistic, positive use of language will inspire people much more than being shouted at. And when you have caught their attention through a better use of language, a better use of communications, let's make sure, as I say, typically through local government, let's make sure we are seen to be delivering. And the delivery will win us back voters from Reform. The tonal change will win us back voters from the Lib Dems and those that stayed at home on the sofa.
Now, that winning voters back in our research, this crossover age, the age at which you're more likely to become a Conservative voter. In the 2017 election, it was 47. In the 2019 election, it went down to 45. At the last election, it was 63 years old. Now, that is not sustainable for the party's voting base. And the challenge for the next leader of the opposition is not necessarily for younger people. It's over 50s who've got to win back. So what would be your target in terms of the kind of an age of voters you want to go for? Because in one hand, if you rush for people my age, millennials, then you're going to miss out this whole chunk of people who are maybe much more easily gettable. But then if you don't focus on the younger people, then there's no pipeline for the future. How would you balance that out?
Well, I think some of it is tonal. I've discussed that. I'm not going to overplay that line. And some of it is about policy. And the question you should ask yourself, or we should be asking ourselves as a party, is what are the issues that face the people that we are trying to win over? And actually, cost of living, it's not just something for young people. The cost of housing, the cost of living, the buoyancy in the British economy, all these things are very, very much relevant to people in that kind of 30s, 40s, 50s kind of age bracket. The fact that we have now got an overly big, sprawling and intrusive state, which is going to get a lot worse under Labour, that hurts a lot of people of that age. And so we should, we should go back to first principles. We should go back to the things that worked. And the things that worked are giving people a genuine stake in the economic growth of the country. Mm-hmm. Margaret Thatcher understood that. That's why we had the big privatisation of those nationalised companies, not just to take them out of the public balance sheet and put them into the private sector, although that was important, but how we did it. Ordinary people owned shares in these big companies. And when those companies did well, ordinary people suddenly found that they were better off as they slept, just like rich people in the previous era used to be. So getting that mass buy-in to the economic success of this country is absolutely key. Selling capitalism for a new generation. When was the last time as a party we really sold the idea of free markets, of liberalism, of personal choice and freedom, of the benefit of lower taxes and less regulation? I can't remember, and I've been doing this a long time. I think if we do that, we can win back people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And you know what? We will start winning the ear, and it will be longer and it will be harder, but we will start winning the ear of people in their 40s, 30s, and 20s. And we won't even need to do cringy videos on TikTok to do it.
When you were talking about the kind of big state, the former Tory Prime Minister Liz Truss said today that the UK is now a socialist state. Do you think it is?
No. A huge amount of time for Liz. She's a long-standing friend. She was incredibly kind to me and Susie when Susie was going through her breast cancer treatment. She was a good boss at the Foreign Office. Liz and I are long-standing friends and remain so to this day. She has got a particularly strident way of putting things across, which I don't always agree with. I think I understand the point that she was making, with which we've slipped into some habits which are not particularly conservative. I'll give you one example. She's a working mum. Susie was a working mum. Cost of childcare. I mentioned this before. We've got this weird situation. Through government intervention, we've made childcare in the UK an almost completely private sector endeavour. We've disincentivised families looking after the children of their extended family, point one. We tax and regulate that sector so highly, it's twice the cost of childcare in France, 3 times the cost of childcare in Germany, which means it's almost completely unaffordable for working mums. So what do? We subsidise childcare through tax revenues, administered by civil servants, paid by tax revenues. And where do we get the tax revenues? From the working mums who are using the childcare in the first place. Now that tax and subsidise habit is actually a surprisingly, or disappointingly left-wing way of dealing with the problem. A more traditionally conservative way of dealing with the problem is to encourage families to look after each other, and where you do have a private sector childcare system, not taxing and regulating it so heavily as you make it unaffordable, ease some of that tax and regulatory pressure, and do what free markets really love to do. Increase supply, reduce cost, improve value to the consumer. That is a conservative way of doing it. What do? The opposite. Tax and subsidise, subsidise and tax, subsidise, regulate, tax and subsidise. Oh, it's not working. Maybe that's what Liz was having a go at.
And how do you tackle this from opposition? Because we are 3 months into the next 5 years, assuming the next election's in 2028, 2029. And if you were to become leader of the opposition, you can't start giving detailed policies now. People have quite short memories, particularly in the political press, which I know quite a lot about. And by the time you get to that point, your big ideas will sort of get lost. So do you begin by doing a critique? Do you begin by primary colours of the debate? What would be your initial priorities in terms of defining what a James Cleverly Conservative Party would stand for?
So if you want the right answers, you've got to start off by asking the right questions. If we want to take the British people with us, and this is where I think Liz made an error, where she put forward a number of really very dynamic, important policy changes, but she hadn't rolled the pitch. She hadn't prepared the British people for the changes that she was going to make, and it spooked the voters and it spooked the markets. So we have to use our time in opposition to prepare the ground so it's fertile for our right of centre ideas. The way you do that is you start by asking questions. So the question should be like, do you believe you are paying too much tax, about right, or not enough?
People will say too much, particularly for low and middle income earners.
Bingo.
But how do you get the money to get that?
So, but this is the point. And Seb, calm yourself. Don't rush ahead. But the point is, we need to ask that question over and over again. We need to get voters to tell us over and over again that they are taxed too highly. Then what you do, and you can tell I've been in sales, you ask a conditional question. And a conditional question, anyone in sales ever know conditional question in sales? No?
Yeah, gentleman at the back does
One
that.
at the back.
Good.
So a conditional question. So you start by saying to someone, right, do you think you're taxed too high, about right, not enough? People say I'm taxed too high. And then the conditional question is, so if I could show you a way where I could protect the public services that you value, but reduce the tax burden that you endure, would you be interested in that? Then you can start having a conversation later in the parliamentary cycle about what that looks like in detail. But if you haven't got that conversation going, if you haven't explained to people that actually by doing the right things rather than trying to do everything, by doing the things that matter and touch people's lives rather than this kind of sprawling spider web of government activity, not only can you protect the things they value, their safety, their defence, their medical facilities, etc., but you can actually do so at a lower tax level. If you don't do that, they'll freak out.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did before. So let's do the hard yards now. Let's start the work straight away, which is having those preparatory conversations so that British people know what's on offer when we get back into government.
Now, one of the things that Onward we believe very strongly does need to happen is house building, because as you probably well know, there's a 1 million house backlog at the moment, and we could build a house something like every 2 minutes, and it would still take us 10 years to clear the backlog, by which time there'd be a whole new backlog of houses that needed to be built, and we'll end in this vicious cycle that means people of the millennial and younger generations, they haven't got that stake in society you talked about, James, but ultimately, under the last parliament, Boris Johnson did try to do planning reform under a local government secretary named Robert Jenrick. It didn't necessarily go anywhere, and that was because the opposition of Conservative MPs, many of whom represented seats that are worried about building the so-called NIMBYs. We believe this does need to be resolved, because we do need to give people that stake in society to build those houses. But how do you convince the Conservative wider movement and Conservative voters that you need to do this? Because the instinct is just to say, well, not in my backyard, as the saying goes.
Yeah, so we've got to do a number of things. We kind of need to do them all at once. The first thing we need to do is we need to create more liquidity in the residential property market. It's one of the reasons why I'm not trying to give everything away, but one of the indicative things I put forward is the scrapping of stamp duty on residential properties. The reason I say that, and the example that sticks in my head, is in the house that I grew up in London, which is a detached Edwardian family house. The house next door to ours, which is a bit bigger than the one I grew up in, I think is a 4, it might even be a 5-bedroom house. That house has been occupied by an empty nester couple, and their kids moved out 35 years ago. So there are 3, maybe 4 empty bedrooms in that house for 35 years. And there's a massive disincentive for that couple to downsize. And you might think, well, it's one house. How does that make a difference? That situation is replicated in 100 houses within 5 minutes walk of the house that I grew up in. And if we could unlock fluidity, liquidity in that housing market, then actually you have the ripple effect. So new buyers are not going to move into a 5-bedroom detached Edwardian house. But someone will move up, and someone will move up, and someone will move up, and someone that is currently in a 1-bedroom flat gets to move into a 2-bedroom flat, releasing a flat at the start of the process.
But we still need to build more houses.
And I'll come on to that. So that can be done at a stroke of a pen. That will kickstart the process. Send a message to the market that we're serious about housing. And then we also have to build. A couple of other things. We can build up. We have some of the lowest density cities in Europe, so we can build up. My campaign team laugh at me whenever I say this. I can't stand bungalows. I hate bungalows. I know some people love bungalows, but I see a bungalow and all I see is 3 or 4 invisible floors that could be above that bungalow that could have people living in it. And then the other thing that we've got to do is we've got to make sure we recognise that when people say no to something, that it is not an illogical response. If you've bought a house with a lovely view across a valley and then someone says, I'm going to build in that valley, you are losing something you paid for. So the incentive structures are all wrong. And there are some serious questions we need to ask, and I'm not going to try and answer them all right here and now because we're a long way ahead from the general election. But how do the people who vote for tax setters vote for people that set lower taxes? How do people who vote for regulators vote for people who set less onerous regulation? How do people who vote for the planners and the house builders vote for people that are going to build more houses? We have to incentivize them. And if we don't incentivize them, we shouldn't be surprised when they say no. So we've got to do both. We've got to create liquidity in the market. We've got to get more houses built. Let's start with the easy stuff, which is where the infrastructure already is, where the jobs already are, where the transport already is, in our urban areas, and go up a little bit. The Victorians, because they had the railway, they had a habit of sprawling outwards, which is why our suburbs are so low rise and so spread out, because that's the Victorians with their blooming trains. The Georgians built to 3, 4, or sometimes 5 stories, and they are beautiful. So we can have denser and more beautiful housing in urban areas and unlock much, not all, but much of the problem that you just discussed. Yes, go on, give that a round.
There we go. And it's actually very nice to be at a Conservative Party event where people are clapping, getting houses built as well. So I'm metaphorically clapping you as well from there. Now, so we'll talk about another thing as well, which is net zero. And obviously, this has been the topic of quite a lot of debate, that it was something that went into law, the end of Theresa May's period within government, and the Conservative government since then have made progress on some areas and not on other areas. There's this kind of idea growing among that we need to pull back from net zero in some way, that you need to lessen the commitments. Do you think that's right or wrong? Do you think that the 2030 and 2035 commitments should stay as they are? And if not, what should they be?
Well, look, we'll have to see what we inherit from the Labour Party. They are making some absolute shocking decisions when it comes to our energy security and that kind of stuff. They are chasing ideological purity. And the people, as is often the case with left-wing ideological purity, the people who are being hurt first and hurt most are the least well off in society. We cannot, we must not, and I will not allow this to become an albatross around the neck of some of the lowest earners in the country. And what we do have to do is we do have to push this as an agenda internationally, because frankly, if we run so far ahead of the pack, we reach, in brackets, this perfection. But India, China, Australia, Indonesia, if they're not coming with us, it's a moot point. Yeah, we are 1%, probably less than 1% now, of net contributions. So even if we did hit net zero tomorrow, in global standards, it would be de minimis if we haven't got these other countries coming along. And actually, therein lies an opportunity, because we have got thought leadership, but more than that, we've got technological leadership. And what we should do is drag the world, kicking and screaming perhaps, in the right direction. And if we do that, we have export opportunities for green energy generation. We have export opportunities for small modular reactors. We have export opportunities for sodium-ion batteries. Anyone know what sodium-ion battery is? Me? I do. My old lecturer does as well. My old university lecturer. But anyway, sodium-ion batteries, they're big, they're ugly, they're cheap, but they are probably one of the best opportunities to replace dirty diesel generators in developing countries. Photovoltaic cells and sodium-ion batteries could mean that diesel generators in the developing world are a thing of the past, and they're being developed in Strathclyde University in Scotland, in the UK. And so that's what we should be doing. We should be pushing at the front edge of all these things, making sure that China is buying British green tech rather than Britain buying Chinese green tech. If we do that, we're winning.
Now, I'm going to do, since we're at a think tank event here, some quick fire questions before we go out to things from the audience here.
As I like to call them, career-ending questions.
5 or 10 years before we get back to power?
I think maybe less than 5 if we get it right. If we get on the front foot, start holding Labour to account, when Prime Minister Rayner, having defenestrated Starmer, does her nostalgia tour to the 1970s on Fast Forward. I think if we get our act together, we could kick them out sooner rather than later. But we will have to work really, really, really hard. It won't just fall in our lap.
Well, I was going to ask you handily, who's your least and most favourite member of the current government?
I really like Angela Rayner. No, look, I don't agree with her. I think she's wrong on so many levels. But genuinely, you've got to admire her. She fell out of schooling. She was a teenage mum. She had no formal qualifications. She got into the world of work. She managed to get herself into the union movement, which is a pretty misogynistic environment. She fought her way up to a really senior position. She's now the Deputy Prime Minister. And if I were Keir Starmer, I would be taking off my expensive donated designer glasses and looking over my shoulder with a real sweat, because she is coming after him. You've got to admire that. You've got to. I don't agree with her, but you've got to admire her. You really do.
And least favourite member?
Oh, mate, how long have you got? There's so it's not an individual; it's a habit. When I was made Foreign Secretary, and I wasn't obsessed by this, but other people commented this. So I was the UK's international representative, and I was African heritage. And as I say, I wasn't making a big thing of this, but it is a thing. And there were black Labour politicians who could not bring themselves to celebrate that. But more than that, Clive Lewis, I'm singling him out, but he's not unique. Clive Lewis said, "Congratulations," in a kind of sarcastic-y tweet. "Shame you had to sell your soul to get it." And I'm not going to swear because there are cameras rolling. But
we can use our imaginations at that point and insert a word there. What is the best and worst thing from 14 years in government?
I think the worst thing is how we responded to the COVID. The lockdowns were wrong. We got it badly wrong. I know that the whole world was scared. It wasn't just us. The whole world was scared. But we turned into all the things that I thought we could perhaps never become. I believed we were a freedom-loving nation, and suddenly we had a situation where neighbours were peering through their net curtains, ringing up the police, saying, "You're only meant to go exercising for an hour, and she's been out for 72 minutes already." You know, we were snooping on our neighbours, dobbing in our friends. We cancelled Christmas. We became fearful and as a society introspective, and it just brought out all the worst. And it was a real indicator that freedom is delicate, and be very, 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 very careful if you break it.
So just on that, if you were leader of the opposition or Prime Minister one day, you would never support any other lockdowns.
Well, look, you can't say that, because if something like the bubonic plague was coming out... Look, what we know now, which we didn't know at the time, was the risk profile of COVID-19. What we now know is that with sensible precautions, people who are otherwise fit were fairly able to withstand the disease. We know that now. We didn't know that properly at the time. But what we did do is we went to this very, very, very extreme, low-risk appetite place. And the other thing that we did badly wrong is we deified certain experts. So epidemiological experts suddenly became the gods amongst gods. They were in the higher tier of the hierarchy. And other experts saying domestic abuse is a real problem and this kills people were relegated. People saying children and adolescent mental health is damaging and it kills people, they were relegated. People saying breaking your economy means we don't have the tax revenues to fund a high-functioning health system were relegated, and it cost lives. Now, we know that now. Let's never have to make that error again. And let's make sure that, as I say, we recognize that freedom is fragile, break it at your cost, and don't just listen to one set of experts. My final point, so I'm ranting a little bit because I feel very strongly about this. The thing I hate, and we did it a bit, Blair did it with detention without trial, this, I have been told by some experts that I have to do this thing, and who am I to argue? Elected politicians' job is to balance the risk and benefits of different expert voices and be held accountable for your decisions. If you're not prepared to do that, get out of politics.
And in one sentence, the best thing, because I want to get to questions.
Oh, the best thing, I talked about my shirt the Ukrainians gave me. I think being well ahead of the international pack at every stage in our support to Ukraine, NLAW missiles before anyone else was doing it, main battle tanks before anyone else was doing it, fighter jet pilot training before anyone else was doing it, pushing for global support to Ukraine, I think was the thing I'm most proud of in terms of what we did in government.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now let's go to the audience. I have lots of questions. I'm going to take them in groups of 3 and keep them as short and sharp as possible. Lawrence, could we go for the gentleman there, and then yes, you there, sir, and then the gentleman at the back here.
Thank you, Pete Bradbury, Chairman of Sussex Conservatives. James, you've spoken about the importance of delivery at local councils to show our competence and capability. I'm currently a member of West Sussex County Council. Across Sussex, we've got some difficult situations, particularly I'm not too concerned about where we're facing Labour because they're doing our job for us at the moment, but very concerned about where we're facing Liberal Democrats and some Greens. My own county division is Cuckfield and the western part of Haywards Heath that you may know slightly through your wife. Yeah, I've held that seat since 2007, but I'm nervous about my prospects in 2025. So what can you do as leader to support us?
Thank you. The question here.
Thank you. Martin Turner from the Bioindustry Association. We represent life sciences and biotech. The Conservatives have left a great legacy of increasing research and development investment from businesses and government and reforming the pension industry to encourage investment into high growth industries. And Onward have written a lot about this. Is that a legacy you're proud of, and what will you do in opposition to ensure that you secure that legacy?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And there was just the lady back there. Thank you.
I'm currently a community councillor standing for election in East Ayrshire. You're saying you hate bungalows, but we're going to be doing housing. Now, I've just changed hats because I'm also to do with disability organisations and the elderly. What is going to be happening with these tiered housing? Are you going to ensure that there is going to be accessible in some of these houses, let alone a 24/7, 365, lift working, as well as fire regulations, remembering the height that a fire engine can go to? Because that is what a lot of the disabled and the elderly do get put into, is low level.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've got bungalows with the mind fire safety and disability. We've got the tech legacy, and we've got the chap here who's very worried about council elections down in Sussex next year.
Yeah, so with the council elections, you're absolutely right. This will be our first test. This is why I've said that, yes, we have to learn lessons from what happened, but let's not spend too much time belly button gazing. We do not have the luxury of a 2, 3, 4 year introspection period before we have to take the fight to Labour, Lib Dems and Reform, because you and many, many other people will be standing for elections next May. And if we are still chewing a stubby pencil and trying to work out what went wrong, when you're up for election, we will be doing you a disservice. So we have to get back on the front foot straight away. Now, when we're in opposition, it's a lot harder to help our colleagues in local government, but this is where I want to make sure that we get the reform of CCHQ happening really quickly as well. So you've got better data, better marketing material, better targeting, so we can use our limited resources more effectively. But the local government elections next May are our first big test, and we have to make sure that you and everyone else standing has got the very, very, very best chance of getting elected. With regard to the bioscience, biotech industry. It is one of our real strengths. And I talked about exporting green tech. I used to be the Minister for Middle East, North Africa. I talked to my friends in the Arabian Gulf. They are fascinated by the UK biotech industry because they are now hitting some of the challenges that other countries are dealing with. So obesity, diabetes, heart disease, these are things that the Arabian Gulf never had to deal with. When they lived in poverty, these weren't problems. Now they're wealthy, they've got these problems. They are fascinated about investing in research and that kind of stuff. So this could be a real opportunity for us. Again, in opposition, it's just a lot harder to make these things happen. So I will continue to push the government on these things, and I will continue to talk to my friends in the international arena about the things that the UK can afford. And with regard to bungalows, so the thing with bungalows is that every bungalow is a 4-story building with the top 3 stories not there. So whatever a bungalow can offer to someone with a disability or whatever, a 4-story building could offer them. And a bungalow on the ground floor and a maisonette or a couple of floors above still gives the opportunity for the person on the ground floor to live a good life with proper mobility, just as a bungalow would, but you also mean that perhaps a young family could live on the flat above and another one above that. And more's the point, and I'm not in this socialist idea that, first you build the environment, then the environment defines the humans. I don't buy into that kind of socialist architectural thing. But the thing with communities, particularly multi-generational mixed communities, when you have a young family living near someone older, rather than all the old people clustered in little bungalow enclaves, actually you get a much healthier mix. I was over in Japan and I saw an old people's home that was also a nursery. And the retirees had little children running around. They were teaching them Japanese calligraphy. They were eating together. They were doing, it's not Tai Chi, but it's the Japanese equivalent of this kind of wonderful, almost balletic movement. And the kids were doing it, and the old people were doing it together. It was beautiful. Humans were meant to live multi-generationally. It's a very modern manifestation of humanity that we segregate people off by age. I think it's unhealthy. And I think there are ways that we could actually get back into the habit of having these quasi-tribal, maybe a bit of my African heritage, communities, mixed generations supporting each other.
Great. Let's get some more questions in. Can we come down to the front here and get a couple here? There's a lady here and then 2 gentlemen here. Ellie's got the microphone there. So there's 2 gentlemen at the front and then the lady here, please.
And good afternoon. Andrew Finding is my name. I'm a simple Conservative Party voter.
Thank you. Excellent.
When you were Home Secretary then, and certainly now, you were talking about effective communication. How effective was your communication over stopping the boats? And why didn't you stop the boats? And to what extent do you feel personally complicit for not doing so?
Thank you.
Cool.
And then the gentleman here.
Thank you. My name's Luke. I'm not important. How do we make London less boring?
Oh, right.
Following on from Luke's question, I'm Soph McVeigh. I'm lead member for housing in Kensington and Chelsea, and we are the only Conservative borough in central London left. And so what can you do to encourage our urban areas to vote Conservative again?
There we are. So 2 London questions and a stop the boats question, because when you became Home Secretary, James, I think you inherited the "we will stop all the boats," which was made by previous Home Secretary or 2, and then you took on that mantle. Do you think at the beginning you talked about very dogmatic communication when you say we will do this, whatever. Was it a mistake to make that commitment to 100% stop the boat, or was it a mistake of delivery? And then obviously these 2 London questions make London less boring. I can't believe you would say London is boring, sir. And getting people to vote Conservative in London as well. Maybe the 2 are linked.
So with regard, I think the phrase "stop the boats" was an error. it distilled a very, very complicated and challenging problem into a soundbite. I suppose the self-imposed yardstick was even one boat was a failure. And that was a unachievable target. As I say, I inherited that. One of my frustrations, you talk about communications, one of my frustrations was that we failed to communicate our successes in the Home Office portfolio. And unsurprisingly, therefore, everyone believed we had succeeded in nothing. So people would say to me, and I had this on the doorstep, I still get it online, people say, oh, you send all this money to France, they haven't stopped a single boat. Well, they stopped about half the attempted boat launches. But we didn't shout about it, so nobody knew it, so we got punished for it. Some people still saying, erroneously, that we were unable to deport foreign criminals. I deported foreign criminals every week. Every week. There were flights going off, dozens, every week. We didn't tell anyone about it, so we got no credit for it. With regard to
London.
Yeah, London. So the point is, again, let's not overpromise and underdeliver. We made that mistake. Let's not do it again. But it was a failure. It was largely a failure of communication, overemphasising and underdelivering. With regard to London, I think I know what you mean. I mean, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is killing London. Sadiq Khan is killing London. I used to work in Soho. I was out there with Tim Barnes, who was the newly elected councillor on the Westminster Council in West End Ward, and we met right outside my old office that I used to work in. And around there was, if not a 24-hour nighttime economy, it was pretty close to a 24-hour nighttime economy. It was buzzing. There were rough edges, of course there were, but it was a buzzing place. Go there now, it's like a monastery after 8 o'clock. And he's killing it. He's absolutely killing it. With regard to urban London, these two things are linked. What we have got to do is we have got to show that conservative principles, less constrictive regulation, a more benign tax environment, less puritanical attitude to people's lives and choices. If people want to have a fag, let them have a fag. I don't smoke anymore, but if other people want to, knock yourself out. If you want to have a pint of beer, knock yourself out. 2/3 of a pint of beer? Oh, come on. Either do it properly and have a pint, or be like the French House. And I mean, I don't know if anyone knows the drinkeries around West End. Be like the French House, only serve halves, but you buy them 2 at a time. But the point being, is that we've got to be the party of freedom and optimism and energy. Our urban areas should exemplify that. So we should be the most natural party for urban Britain, rather than, as we are at the moment, the party that people do not think to turn to.
Thank you. Let's get some more questions. Let's go over this side of the room now. We've got the gentleman here, and then we've got these two gentlemen just behind as well. Nice and pithy questions, if we can, please.
James. Wayne Fitzgerald from Peterborough, everybody. I'm a Conservative group leader there. And James has been very helpful to us in the past. What I want to know is, how are you going to inspire younger people to seek the opportunity of owning their own home?
Yeah.
Particularly when Labour have ripped out the right to buy, which some people have issues of. But we are aspirational home ownership party. What are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the two gentlemen just behind there.
Hello, James. Peter Grogan, Councillor, Redcar in Cleveland. Firstly, thank you for coming up and helping in our by-election where we won our seat. We lost a lot of good MPs in the Red Wall in the northeast, and we'd like to know what. No, you're not going to tell us your plans, but you must have some ideas how to win them voters back.
Thank you.
Hi, Charlie Welton, Liberty. You mentioned restrictions on civil liberties during the pandemic, and you also mentioned Tony Blair in detention without trial. How will you protect civil liberties under Labour if you are leader of the Conservatives, and how will you then in government if you win the next election?
There you are. Civil liberties, inspiring younger voters for homeowners, and winning back some of the Red Wall.
Wayne, look, thank you. And you're absolutely right that we are at our best when we are seen as the champions of a home-owning democracy. Macmillan understood that, Thatcher understood that. If we lose sight of that, then we are toast. So we've discussed a little bit about densifying our urban areas. Some of it is also about the costs. Again, one of the things with planning reform is if we make the planning system so bureaucratic and expensive, the only players in the market who can afford the bureaucratic cost of going through the planning system are the large-scale builders. So unsurprisingly, they are now dominating the market. We've almost completely squeezed smaller local building firms out of the market, and smaller local building firms tend to build stuff that people want to live near. So we've created this really perverse incentive. So for a lot of the reasons we've already discussed, we need to get back into the habit of being a home-owning democracy, and as I said, reducing some of the tax burden on residential property transactions, I think will introduce a more movement in the market, and that movement in the market, I think, will drive down a lot of costs, particularly for young homeowners. Peter, I was so chuffed when we got that, because that puts this in overall control now, doesn't it? No, that's not quite. Oh, right, I'll be up there again, and we'll get it sorted next time, yeah? So, yeah, look, and this goes right back to the over-promising, under-delivering, and sadly, I think we did it twice. I think we did it during Brexit, and then we did it again at the 24 general election. So I was a Brexiteer, as I've said, and I'm very proud, I have no regrets on that, but there was an opportunity that we should have grasped to rebalance the relationship across the UK, and we didn't grasp it. Now, with levelling up, I absolutely subscribe to the idea of levelling up, but I think in hindsight we should have done it differently. So again,
how would you have done it differently?
Instead of taxing and subsidising, which suddenly means people perceive there are winners and losers, and suddenly you get London going, well, you're nicking all my money and giving it to these blooming northerners, and I don't mean Watford, like proper north, Peterborough. You know, so we don't want to have this kind of, you know, zero-sum game. What we should do is what Ben Houchen's doing on the Tees Valley, reducing regulation, reducing red tape, attracting inward investment, and unlocking the already existing potential in many parts of the UK. And the great thing about that is it's really cheap. Actually costs less than the tax and subsidised habit that we slipped into. That is how we then regain the credibility of those voters up in Cleveland and in lots and lots of other different parts of the country, not just in the north. And then, Charlie, with regard to civil liberties, we have got to be constantly vigilant. We have got to be and disciplined, because it's really easy for someone to say, "Oh well, you know, we're only putting this restriction in to protect ... But you don't see the other side of the equation. What are we losing? And as I say, we recognise that in our understandable desire to protect, we actually imported a whole load of invisible risks. And that is so often the case when you give away civil liberties. And the truth is, it can very easily be a one-way valve. And once something's gone, it's really hard to get it back. So let's be very, very careful about giving away our freedoms.
Right, two final quick questions on the last of James. So we'll get the lady here and then the gentleman here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Shuna Mitchell, and I'm lucky enough to be Bedfordshire and London. So I'm coming from two angles. One on NIMBY. I think this is a very unfortunate word. I could be accused of being NIMBY, and I have an extraordinary view on one side, which is completely flooded, and people who are NIMBY are actually the carers and the nurturers of nature. So NIMBY is a word to use at peril. On the other side of me, I have a school. And I'm very conscious that Westminster, London, and Bedford, and even walking around Birmingham, everywhere is pedestrianised, and there are ring roads. Time to repeal these things. I'm a medic's daughter. Let's go back to having the veins and the arteries actually working of roads that have taken hundreds of years to evolve, that go from A to B quickly and smoothly. And on the question of building, as I understand it, there is a VAT applied on any restoration to any house or refurbishment or anything else. Now, that's a hindrance. If that VAT was abolished, great.
Thank you. And then very quickly, the gentleman here, last question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Birindwa. My question I would like to ask, I know someone's already mentioned it, and you said that every week you deport many people regarding the board. So, if you don't mind, could you please tell us what's the procedure you've been doing, what you try to stop the bots? And because, for my sector, we did as well just to do some investigation. We found a few information, but it was very hard. We could not know who to talk to, who we can go straight forward and to explain what we already investigated. Investigated. If you don't mind, you can a briefing.
Thank you. Okay, so just very quickly, James, we've got to wrap up in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Take those 2 points.
I can see my campaign team pulling faces through the outside of the window.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means I'm late to the next event. Look, you talk about VAT and refurbishment work. Again, look, I think we should lower taxes that will stimulate market activity. I haven't looked into detail. I don't want to get drawn into too much granularity this early in the process, but things that get people moving, get money moving, get particularly the artisan tradespeople, local businesses, these all sound like the kind of things we should be stimulating. And if there's taxes we can reduce that stimulate that market, I will always be willing to give that serious consideration. And with regard to stopping the boats, so the plan was, and I don't want to go into too much detail, is you recognise people smuggling is a business. If you make a business unprofitable, the business stops. The way you make a business unprofitable is you depress demand for the product and you increase price for the product. Economics 101. That's what we were doing with the people smuggling. We were introducing additional costs, both financial costs and risk costs. And through things like the partnership we had with Rwanda, we were reducing the demand so that we hit that inflection point where it stopped being profitable. That's how I was planning to stop the boats. It was never easy. It was never going to be simple. It was never going to be immediate, but there was a plan. Unfortunately, we weren't able to deliver on it. And what happens in the future, we'll need to review that again. But good border control means that actually the people who come to the UK from overseas, if everyone knows that they're here legitimately, fairly, they're bringing talent and enterprise, we actually have much, much better race relations in the UK. So good borders make for good race relations. That benefited me and my family. That's the gift I want to put on to other generations.
And I think with that is a brilliant moment to thank everyone for all of you coming here, and above all, thank James for your time and covering so much ground under so much. And thank you all for your time. Thank you, James.